Right. Hello. Welcome, everyone, and happy Tuesday. My name is Teddy Andres. I'm the studio coordinator of sculpture here at Anderson Ranch, and welcome to our last and final, very exciting, summer faculty lecture series. Woo! I'm very excited and honored to introduce my good friend Hiroki and Michael Puryear this evening. Both speakers will present for 20 minutes, followed by a 10-minute question and answer period. So we definitely look forward to those questions. Before we begin, if we can just take a moment to silence our cell phones. Thank you. All right, cool. So our first speaker tonight is Hiroki. He received his BFA from the California College of the Arts. He began teaching Makuhanga at Anderson Ranch over 25 years ago. He has traveled to Japan for an intensive artist in residence program sponsored by the Makuhanga Innovation Laboratory and attended the second International Makuhanga Conference and Satellite Program in Tokyo. Please welcome to the stage Hiroki.
Well, thanks for coming. Thanks for having me back at the ranch. I always feel like an old ranch hand. I'm ready to shovel snow or move some bear poop or whatever. So I'm here to work, and I'm glad to be back. I've missed the past couple of years because of the pandemic, and what I miss most is the dialogues with the students. And now that we're on the second day, I am in my element. So thank you for having me back again. I did a little research, and Hawaii does these public commissions in every public building that's been built. It's called the 1% bill. Most of the states in this country now have it. But it was first started 6 years ago in Hawaii. And it was the vision of Alfred Price, who was a retired architect that was the first director of the State Foundation, and he wanted to see art, visual art, and architecture to be one again. So he devised a plan to take 1% of the budget for any new building been built to go to a commission of art. And so that's where it started. Hawaii's, as long as the state's growing, there's new schools that have been built, libraries, courtyards, there's always a commission. This mural of mine was for a convention center. So 1% of millions of dollars, or billions of dollars in this cases. Can you hear me? Okay, thanks. Anyway, where was I? So the 1% for the arts started years ago in Hawaii, 60 years ago. And I think, not doing that much research, we have the first state art museum. So all the collections over the past 60 years it goes to the state Hawaii State Art Museum, and that's all the art is bought from the taxpayers of Hawaii. So we have been actually the leader of these 1% bill. Of course, you have big states like New York or California that budgets will grow bigger and the commissions are larger and it accommodates more artists, but that's the way it should be. You know, as long as the state's growing, there's work and commissions for artists to apply and express their sensibility to their environment or whatever they're into. Anyway, I'm going to try to do this in 20 minutes. This is one of the commissions. This is actually a big drawing. It's about 95 feet. There's the drawing on plastic. And it's been transferred now to paint and relief work on there. So it was a big project. It was hard for me to visualize the whole thing. But then I said, well, let's do 30 feet at a time. And so it made the project a little smaller. So it's 15 by 30 feet. The actual mural is, this will be a detail. This piece is called Mauka Makai, or Mountain to the Sea. And the Hawaiians had a different vision for the land. They saw the land in strips coming from the mountain to the sea, not in rectangular subdivision of thinking or linear thinking as Westerners. They saw land strips from the mountain to the sea, so they're thin pie shapes. And the reason for that is because you could benefit from the mountain, food from the mountain, and food from the sea. Quite a concept, if you think about it. And this is the middle part of the mural, and it involves a drawback of water. I've been through several tsunami in Hawaii, and the ocean comes in slowly, but when it pulls back, it takes everything with it. So that's kind of the feeling I wanted to get in this piece here. That's my daughter. She was a dancer in New York for 12 years. I had two daughters who were dancers in New York for 12 years, and whenever I have a big project, well, I would hire her to be an assistant. And well, I'm there for scale, and that's my wife, Setsuko. I end up the last 30 feet of the mural with the night sea. And if you want to feel the power of the ocean, go there at night. You can hear it breathing. And here's the overall mural without the relief area. I'm using a friend's studio, John Buck and Deborah Butterfield, that has a house there. And that's the installation. So this is at the convention center. It's, if you can imagine the Denver airport with the nice translucent light from the canvas, that's how it looks like. And those are palm trees and steel palm trees. So it's kind of a nice dialogue you see there. But it's a beautiful piece of architecture. And it's the one that I think was the most meaningful because we worked with the lighting and the architect, decide on the scale. So it was a kind of a dialogue going, how big the mural should be, where it should be. And so it started from the ground level, from working with the architects to the finished product. So I think Alfred Price, who designed this whole program, would be very proud of this project there. And this is another mural, quite similar. This is for a private, for the First Hawaiian Bank. I'll show you some of the details. The ocean for most Hawaiians is recreation. So I used homage to the square, Joseph Alberts, so you could sit in a square within a square within a square. The most dramatic part of this mural is the change of night and day. And this is our public library. It's the main library in the state of in the city of Honolulu. I was asked to do a floral mural. This is made of porcelain ceramic tiles. This is the concept. So it's called Ocean Currents. So the movement of the lighter trails are the current, and each of the current leads to, one current leads to the children's library, one leads to research, one leads to literature and philosophy. The hole in the middle is where a big planter is with some ornamental palm trees. You have to have fun in these things. So we just took this shot for fun, but I haven't done a tile mural, so I had to fabricate one that in wood. So this is wood panel, seeing how the details of the raindrop may work. Oh, that's funny. You have to have fun. This is, I have to do 2 drawings. That's 2,000 square feet. That's about a half a tennis court. And so I just got over the second one. One was for the tile maker to set the tiles. This is Michelangelo style. You have to make little holes and translate the drawing to the concrete floor. And we're back at home. I had a great assistant from Thailand who's lived with us for 15 years. And we're making the stencils so that the sandblaster could blast the hard porcelain tiles around the stencil. This is the green, light green stencils there is made of rubber, so the sand just bounces off of that and carves the hard stuff. There he is, going to work. You can see the patterns of, we did 3,000 rocks, by the way, and we just laid them organically on site. And he worked 18 hours, and at 12 at night, we pulled the stencils off to look at the detail. And by next morning, you wouldn't believe it was all clean. All the sand, dust was all gone. It was incredible. That's a good reason to work with these professional tile people on there. So that's the big current. You see those light trails leading to the different branches of the library. And this is another project. This is a small high school on the Big Island. We're installing another mural. This one is painted on concrete and installing concrete walls. I'll give you a few more details. It's not an impressive piece of architecture. I think those pillars are in the way, but those are some of the elements you have to deal with. This is another mural for the First Hawaiian Bank, their main branch in Honolulu. I did this thinking I was flying to New York a dozen times and looking at the landscape across the country. So these are little patterns. I call it quilt patterns. That I saw from the air, erosions of rocks, agriculture, irrigation, and surface textures that you can view from the top, looking down from the airplane. And before I did all this narrative mural work, I was a watercolorist. This is a very early start, and I started to record in watercolors the environment around me. That's an outhouse with some banana leaves. A 55-gallon drum. I did all the men that worked for my father. I went to their homes and painted them. And this is when I became a full-time artist. I pinned up my work shirt. I'm a third-generation coffee farmer. And I said, I'm going to be a full-time artist from this point on. This is in 1973. And there I went into the landscape, explored. I did a painting a day for 7 years. And the work of the lava rock that you just saw gave me my first residency. That was at the Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. And they thought I could paint rocks, I guess. And so these are the pieces I've done on that residency. That's Mauna Loa. With snow on, we have two mountains that are 13,000 feet. But I just talked to a geologist there, and he said we're the tallest mountains if you measure the mountains from the bottom of the ocean. Was I correct? So there we are. And my next residency came very quick. I got a residency for a year in Japan. This is a big rock in front of a small studio. The density of population is so thick, it's hard to find a studio, but I found this old bathhouse, and that became my studio. And I'll just show you briefly some of the works. I continued works in rocks, but instead of lava, there were granite, I guess. And then when I got back from Hawaii, I started to do these large watercolors. They were 5 feet to 8 feet watercolors, and doing these little pebbles underwater. And then I wanted to study Japanese woodblock printing, and that's what I'm here to teach. And I wasn't interested in this early form of classic Japanese woodblock prints. I was more interested in the modern, more contemporary ones. And so this is one example of the kind of work I've done there. But you know, life is always a surprise. I didn't like those figurative work, and then I started to do some in a very classical manner. So I chose all of the European artists. Gauguin is one of them. There was influence by the 17th century Japanese woodblock prints. So I started to put them in my painting. That's a 17th century woman with a Matisse kimono. And that's Picasso. It's called French Kiss. That's M.C. Escher fish and bird pattern on a 17th century kimono. I would challenge kimono makers actually to do one. That's Gertrude Stein from Oakland. That's where I went to school. And Bob Arneson. So I did a little more figurative work. I never saw myself as a figurative artist, but and then when Bob died, I did a bust of him. And when I visited Montana, I realized what clear cutting was about, clear cutting a forest. So I used this bald head as a clear cut area with trees on the side. I think you would like this humor. And slowly I became a print maker, so I think looking at prints in multiple gave me an idea of doing paintings in a set size and motif, so I could start tiling. So I could do 100 tiles if I wanted to and keep the painting growing. And so that's one example. And then I started to do prints that way. This print is called 27 Views of Water. And it's a mixture of my images with Japanese yukata, which is a summer kimono, and it's usually printed in blue and white. A project I did with Bod Shark, in fact, the first project, he's the master printer in Colorado. We've been collaborating for the last 27 years. And this is 9/11. We all have been through that. Or I'm looking at your age. Yes, we've all been through that. And so when 9/11 happened, I did portraits of all my friends of different nationality. Immigration was a big thing. And I put a generic image of man and woman as part of the image there. I think Esther Shimazu is in here. She's one of the artists that's teaching from Hawaii this week in ceramics. And I continued in a format. This is called Orange Global Warming. Oh, warning, excuse me, global warning. So it's a play of words. You can see the World Trade Tower there with the dollar sign. And whenever you see 2 dots in the square means poison water. And of course, the broken radiation circle there is radiation. So it's kind of the world that's turned unbalanced. This is our local newspaper. And I saw the front page called West Hawaii Today. And you see the count marks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I decided to use them in my pieces here. So I did flowers. Remember the song, Where Have All the Flowers Gone? The last verse is, gone to soldiers, everyone. So the marking represent each soldier that died in the war in Iraq. And I have 4,500 markings. This is some of it. That would be an installation. Now, on the bright side of things, I live on the west side of the island, and we have beautiful sunsets. So one day I got up and I said, I should do paintings of sunsets. And how about 365 sunsets? So I did these small paintings. They're only 6 inches by 9 inches. But when you put it together, they're 10 by 30 feet. So I from that on, I started to play with numbers. And that gives me going and gives me a goal to work towards. I should mention, how do I go back? I should mention the person that bought this painting is even more incredible. His name is Gary Kearns. His network is I Can. It says Incredible Children's Art Network, I Can. And he provides for 4 deprived high school in San Diego. If the school comes with 1 classroom dedicated to the arts, he'll hire a teacher, an assistant, and the best art material in music and art. And so he's now sponsors 4 high schools in San Diego that came up with 1 classroom that's devoted for the arts. And he also pays their health insurance. And the back of each of those little paintings is a tide calendar. In Hawaii, we fish on the rising tide. And so we have a daily calendar there. And so the back of each of these 365 paintings, there's the tide calendar. And I play with numbers again. So at age 65, I decided, well, I'll do 65 organic ceramic forms. My wife is a ceramicist, and sometimes I sneak in her studio and do some work. And this show was special because this was one of the major exhibition hall in Honolulu, and we had a family show, you might say, with my daughter's work and my wife's work, who is a ceramicist. And there, I'll show you a couple more, mixing paintings and ceramic. And my last and biggest, actually, residency was in Japan. It was a 2-month residency in the foot of Mount Fuji. And there's Mount Fuji. I swear the weather pattern changes around Mount Fuji. You can see it, and you open your front door, and there it was, right in front of you. And there were 4 of us from all around the world, 1 from Great Britain, 1 from Thailand, and a woman who was taught here from Walla Walla, Washington, and myself. We were given a gift and time to work, a nice studio. We had a cook, and so we could work 14 hours a day. Let's see, and we learned how to mount paper, but everything in Japan is very specialized. So we have special brushes to do different things. What I want to point out is that little black screen in the round circle is made out of horsehair. That's where they push the rice paste through to take all the big particles off. And so horsehair was used for many different things, including the brushes that I use in the mokuhanga printing there. And there's the paper maker. And before we go into the residency, this is how I did my research. This is some of the publications that I looked to. And I decided I wanted to be not just work there, but I want to be part of the history of Japan. So I pick a format that the size of the prints that I was going to make was going to be 13 inches tall, 9 inches wide. So in my intellectual way, I could be part of the mokuhanga Renaissance history in Japan. So I started to do prints the same size, and you can see the I printing 2 prints and putting them together. So they are diptychs. So this is the first time I've done diptychs, but all the prints were done 9 by 13 inches. And so famous artist, Hokusai, did one of the views of Mount Fuji. There's 5 big lakes where the residency was. So I just decided to do it. My theme is water rights and water containers. So all of the images you see here will have some kind of water containers in there. I think it took me 2 years to print all of these images. This is the exhibit in Helena, Montana at the Holter Museum. And there's kids there, and they're looking at very familiar water containers, measuring cups and water jars and tall glasses of water, and so on. And you can take those same blocks, line it up in a row, and you can make long narrative prints. So I took those same blocks, and I made this series of prints. They're about 7 foot long, 13 inches high. This is called Too Little, Too Much. It's never just right. There's always too much rain or not enough. And then we complain. And a little more ceramic work. This is in my gallery. So I decided to make rocks, little pebbles, beach stones. But within this beach stones, you would see, and driftwood, you would see little objects, plastic objects that floated from Japan after the 3/11, March 11 tidal wave and nuclear disaster. So there's a big current that all of the waste, plastic waste, eventually ends up on the most southern part of the Big Island. And I've been there several times for a cleanup. And so that's what this piece is all about. And more ceramic pieces, except these are making plastic parts or worn plastic from the sea. And when I put it together, this is called counter movement. When we have a hurricane in the normosphere, it goes in a counter movement. So I took the small pieces, which we call fish food. That's what the fish is eating when the plastic breaks down into those small particles. And so I arranged that in a counterclock movement, which is a hurricane in the northern hemisphere. And 2016 was a very rough year for our coral reefs. Many of the coral died, and the water got too warm. So I did this series of bleached coral on there. And that's the whole installation after it was done. And then I went back to painting watercolors. This is you can buy paper 30 feet long. So this is a 30-foot watercolor. And I started to do prints. I once read water purifies itself if it runs downstream 3 miles. So I was going to do a 3-mile print, but I stopped. This is ridiculous. And recently I've done a 100-foot painting. I just wanted to do a large painting, and I'll show you a couple of details. And my last project was this. That's a leaf with the map of South America. The big green shape is Brazil. And wherever you see those red marks, that's where I took a mosquito coil and burnt holes in it and painted the backing of the painting red. So that's where all the rainforests are being destroyed. And this is Brazil 60 years from now, or South America 60 years from now. And if we continue to burn as we do, it could happen. And I grew up in this little town. If you blink your eyes driving through, you have missed it. And that's our gallery. I run the print program at our art center. 27 years ago, after coming to the ranch, we started a nonprofit. It's called the Hululu Foundation for Culture and the Arts. So we started an art center. And we have exhibits. This looks like it's in my studio, but it's called the Donkey Mill Art Center. This was an old coffee mill. Hawaii is a blue state, but the donkey is what we used to pack the coffee in the old days before Jeeps came along. And we have a strong children's program, paper making, mural painting. I'm not sure what they're doing here, sharing some artwork. And ceramics is a big program. I think this must be, I was going to say Astor is here, but that's an artist from San Francisco giving a workshop. We had Karen Coons who teaches here, so I invited many of the artists that I've met here at the ranch, including Liz Farrell and Doug Casebeer that ran the program here at the ranch. An artist from Japan, basket making. I'm not sure what that is, the print program. And I run the print shop. And we do a little performance. Mochi pounding, so it's a cultural study. Here's a fundraiser with cultural food. And hula dances. And I've done projects with about sharks in Hawaii. He has a studio there. In this case, I carved the key box, so all the main details. Ken Little, John Buck, he visits here regularly. There's John Buck. We did a print for him with his son. There's the blocks on the floor and the finished print on the wall. There's the complete print. And I'll end up with this. I'm also a third-generation coffee farmer. And there I am, picking the red hot beans. So I've been the third generation. And I received now a federal grant for good stewardship because I've been an organic farmer for the last 47 years. And perhaps it's the most honorable prize I've gotten to this day. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hiroki. Next up, we have Michael Puryear. He's a nationally recognized designer / furniture maker. He's self-taught, learning his craft through reading and experimentation. He's been practicing this craft for more than 50 years. The Museum of Art and Design in New York City, the Mint Museum in Charlotte, North Carolina, and the Peabody, Essex, and Salem, Massachusetts are among the museums that he has exhibited his work. His work's been published in many books, including Makers, A History of American Studio Craft, published by the University of North Carolina Press, and Furniture with Soul, Master Woodworkers and Their Craft by David Savage, published by Kodansha in both English and Japanese. His work is found in the collections of the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation, Rockefeller University, Newark Museum, and the Smithsonian Museum of African American Museum of History and Culture. Michael has taught at many craft schools, including Penland, Haystack, Anderson Ranch, and the Center for Furniture Craftsmanship, to name a few. He was an associate professor at the State University of New York, SUNY Purchase, for 13 years. And Michael is a member of the Furniture Society, where he has served as a trustee for 8 years. Please welcome to the stage Michael Puryear.
is this the control device? Okay. That's just an introductory page showing a detail. I'm not sure I know how to use this. Could I get some instruction?
It's got like a clicker. You might have to point it. There we go.
Oh, to the projector?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. This is a bench I made from a commission in Brazil, and it has a very unusual story in that I was in Brazil to help install my brother's show at the Sao Paulo Biennale. And the consulate had a party, and this American woman was there, and she asked what I did, and I said I was a furniture maker. She says, "Oh, give me your card. I want you to make a bench for me to put my stockings on." And I thought, okay. And, I just thought that was, kind of party talk, and I gave her my card. Thought it would go away, but it didn't. And so this is the result. Details. It's made out of bubinga and a leather seat. This is one of a series of pieces that I've worked with in which I explore geometric shape floating over or appearing to float over a curved surface. And my connection to that is really thinking about a human being, that we are both rational and emotional. And I feel that rectilinear forms are very rational and curved forms are more emotional. It's a detail. This is called the barrow chair. It's a upholstered chair. It's been relatively popular. I had it in my sketchbook long before I knew how to build it. And actually, I had a residency, my first residency here was at Anderson Ranch in 2002. And that's when I figured out how to make this piece. This is a folding screen. It's a S curve. It's done for my students. It's done in a vacuum bag to make the curve. And the technique, and I'm not going to remember the name of it, is to fill the grain with contrasting color. So basically what I do is I dye the whole panels black, and then I just fill the grain. You need open-grained woods like ash and oak. This is ash, and that's the detail. Are those images keystoned or something? Yeah, or is it just where I'm standing from? Anyway. This is just a coffee table I did for a client. Actually turned out to be one of my best clients. It's made out of lace wood, the base, and the top is sycamore. This is a stand-up desk I did for a veterinarian who liked to do their work standing up. It's made out of lace wood and cherry. This is an interesting piece. It was a commission. Most of what I do is commission, but this was for a client who had an apartment on the Upper East Side, and on the Upper East Side and the West Side, they had apartments that had big foyers in them, and they were going to use their foyer as a dining area because there was a kitchen off of it. But they didn't want to have the table in the middle of the space all the time. So actually, you can't see it here, but there's a quadrant that could be taken out of that table so it could be pushed up against an outside corner. And that stimulated the base immediately because it couldn't be a solid base. It had to be able to accommodate being in a corner. It's ash dyed and bleached. Okay. Oops, I think, can I go back? Oh, that's a detail. Maybe these are somewhat out of order. Anyway. I'm going back. What's going on? Okay. This is Buffet 2. It was a daughter piece to another piece that I did for an art dealer in D.C. And her daughter lived in New York. And she had seen the piece that I'd made for her mother. And so she commissioned me to do a piece, but the space in which it was going to be was smaller and taller, so it takes this shape. You'll see when I show you the mother piece. The doors are curved, and I often think about how the experience of using a piece is. And in this case, I was thinking that she wanted drawers for, cutlery and napkins and stuff. And so I designed this so that you could open the drawers without opening the doors. So you could get to, whatever you needed in the drawers without opening the doors. This is another console table. It's kind of a more modernized version than the original one that you saw earlier. I've got to hold this up. Okay, these are really out of order. This was a commission that I got in Chicago when I was showing at the ACE crash show in Chicago. And these seem very, can I just see whether these are just where I'm standing. Okay. It's Bubinga and Wengi, and the doors slide, and the little cubbies, the 4 cubbies have the lights in them that she wanted to be able to have some special objects shown there. And so the Wengi is the dark brown wood, and Bubinga is the light red wood. That's a detail. This was a commission for the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation. One of their fellows wanted a desk, and it's a desk that I made for them, following that kind of pattern that I've been using somewhat. But what you can't see really is that the grain in the heartwood, the dark stripe through the top, is in a curve, and so I mimic that curve on the front and the back. So it's a subtle curve, but nonetheless it's there. This is called the Wobble Stool. It's based on some research done by anthropologist Galen Krantz, who studied seating in the world. And one of her realizations was that in cultures where people don't sit with back support, they don't have back pain. And so she did a lot of research, and this was in response to that idea. It's also reflects I studied Tai Chi for 30 years, and that's very much about centering yourself and supporting yourself in a natural way. So I made this piece that has a new pneumatic cylinder that can rise and lower. And the bottom is domed. You can't see it here. But when I go to the next, something's not, anyway, I'll go back. Sorry. You can't see it, but it actually gives you movement so that you can move around. It's for working. It's not for relaxing or reading, although some friends of mine thought that, some potential clients thought they would want it for a bar stool, but you always have to keep your feet on the floor. But the prototype has become my shop stool, and it's pretty effective for working. Okay. This is in the Newark Museum's collection. It's just called coffee table, arch coffee table. And it's ash, again, bleached for the top and dyed for the base. And in the arch, you can see the grain showing. And it's a bent lamination. And the reason that I could have cut that out of a solid piece of wood, but with it, the grain wouldn't look natural. And so bent laminations is done where you take a board, slice it into thin strips that'll actually bend to that strip. And if you keep them in order of the way you cut them off and reassemble it on the form when you're bending it, it will look like a natural piece of wood with the grain flowing in a natural way. This is called tori tansu. In Japan, the ceremonial gates are called toris. That's the wengi, the dark wood. And the chests are called tansus. And that the chest is suspended on those arches. It doesn't have legs on it supporting itself on the floor. The ash, the wood on the tansu is called tamo, which is a curly ash from Japan. Oh, sorry. You can see I'm a Luddite when it comes to technology. This was a commission from the Wharton Eschrick Museum in Philadelphia. Wharton Eschrick is kind of considered the, not the founder, but he's represents the beginning of the studio furniture movement. This is tulip poplar tree that was on the property, and it was at risk of falling onto the building, which is a historic site. And so they cut it down and milled it and gave the wood to various makers. Some were even ceramicists, where they used the shavings to fire their pots and stuff. There were some printmakers and so forth, but this is, it's called a yellow poplar bench. Yellow poplar, tulip poplar and yellow poplar are the same. And I dyed this with some aniline dye, and so I wanted to use the yellow poplar name for it. What target am I aimed at? Oh, okay. That's just a detail. Oh, okay. Let me back up. This is a wall-hung guitar stand. This client was, he worked on Wall Street, but he was a pretty good guitarist. And we became friends just meeting each other at craft shows. And he said that he wanted to have a wall-hung guitar case so that he would play it more rather than having to open up a case and pull it out and so forth. And while we were talking, he pulled out this box, dusty cardboard box, and when he was younger, he had wanted to make his own guitar. So he had that was going to be the form, the light side of that was going to be the form. That's how traditional Spanish guitars were shaped, like that. And the rosewood of the square was going to be the material for the back, the sides and back of the form. And the light neck of the guitar he had made, so I split that. And then, after, we talked about the project, and he said, well, after you make the guitar stand, we had both seen the Picasso show of these wall-hung sculptures of the guitars. And he said, well, maybe you can do something with this after you do that. And as I went and thought about what to do, I realized, well, why not bring them together And so I incorporated those parts into the design. And is it me or is it? Okay. And that's how it opens. And you just lift the guitar out. This was a commission by the Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, Mass. They have an amazing collection of Japanese, Chinese furniture that was formed by the clipper ships who were in the Pacific trade. There was a I don't know what you would call it, but an organization of captains, and they had to bring back a piece of Japanese furniture on each trip they made. And so they invited about, I'd say about a dozen of us to create our interpretation of Japanese pieces. We had an amazing weekend there. They invited us for a weekend and let us go through the museum. We could take some of the Chinese furniture apart. Chinese furniture, the joints are largely puzzle joints because the glues that they had accessible were very weak. So a lot of the joints locked together physically. And these aren't based on, the joints here aren't based on that joinery. It's a pretty complex joinery. But the piece is called, I'm trying to get the Chinese name, but it's For the Masters is for the translation. And it's a piece for the afterlife for the founder of the Tai Chi school that I studied, Chairman Cheng Ming, Professor Chen Ming-ching, who was a master of 5 arts. He was a calligrapher, a doctor, a printmaker, martial artist, and I can't remember what the others are. Anyway, so the whole principle of this, in China, the color of death is white. So, and this is meant to be basically used in the afterlife. So the whole kind of appearance of disarticulation is to suggest something that would be more ethereal. And it's made out of English sycamore, which is actually a maple. And the dark parts on the feet were an observation that I had about Chinese furniture, old Chinese furniture, is that often the finish was deteriorating on the lower part because they were on clay tile floors that weren't sealed, so the moisture was coming up and affecting the finish on the legs, feet. This is a piece in the Smithsonian African American Museum of History and Culture. It's called the Dan chair, which is a stylized version of a chair that a variety of peoples in Africa use similarly, and I named it after the Dan people, who are one of those people. The traditional African chair is much more squat than this, but I wanted to accommodate, a more modern sitter. And it's made out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7 pieces. Each leg is separate, and the assembly is kind of puzzle-like too. Each of those pieces interlock with each other. And I had wanted to use a graphite finish for a long time on pieces of furniture, but graphite is kind of fugitive, and it also, your hands, the oil from your hands can turn it dark. And if you put a finish over it, it will turn dark. So I discovered that there's a graphite form of a cake that has a clay binder in it, and then I could rub it on and burnish it, and it doesn't come off on your hands or turn dark. It doesn't have a finish, it's just the graphite on it. And that's a detail. And on the leg there, I use a technique in Japan, it's called ukibori, where you produce a relief, a surface that is, has a relief rather than an impression. But it's done by actually making an impression on the wood, and then you reduce it around it, and then you steam that area, and it swells up and becomes a relief. And that's it.
So we'll just take